Hello, this is Katie. Today I'm going to be showing you another of my essential techniques. So this is something I use quite a lot, especially if I'm doing sort of rosary linking or something like that. And I just want to add a little bit more interest in the links in between. So occasionally I'll pop a caged bead in. So this is a caged bead. So this one I've just made up into an earring, so you can see kind of how it works into a design. And you can see it's a bead and it's got the wire going through it, but we've also caged it using this caging technique. So let's just take a look at what we're going to need to make those. So the wire that we're going to be using is a 0.8mm wire. That is a UK term. So in the American terms or the US terms, this would be your 20 gauge wire. So I'm using that for the cage and also using that for the actual link that goes in between, the one that goes through. Lots of words today. So the bead size that I'm using for this demonstration is a 10mm diameter bead that is drilled through, so make sure that your wire will actually go through the drill hole. Okay, so you can adjust this, just the wire gauge for different size beads. So if you're using a very small bead, you would use a lesser gauge wire, you just a finer gauge wire, and you can kind of gauge it. But this is kind of the ideal size to kind of just jump in and have a go. It's very forgiving, so you can kind of be quite sort of manhandle it a little bit and get your cage how you want it. So I would definitely practice on this 8mm 20 gauge wire. The tools that I'm going to be using, nice basic tools. So I've got some flush cutters, round nose pliers, and I've got some chain nose pliers. I usually have 2 pairs just in case I decide these are just kind of standard, these are finer. I just always have them handy because I never know which ones I'm going to pick up. So let's get started. So this one is the one I've already caged, so you can see what we're actually going to be making. So you can see the actual cage is quite dense around the top, so that's going to give you like a lot of support around your connections. We're going to be doing wrapped loops. You could do a single loop if you want to. If you're not very sure about wrap loops, I have got in my essential techniques range of videos, tutorials, there is a wrap loop demonstration and a wrap loop tutorial, which will help you make really nice, good, perfect wrap loops every time. And the other technique that we're going to be using is a spiral. So let's just move some things out of the way. So we're going to need some chain nose pliers and your round nose pliers mainly. I'm just going to move the bead and our little bar that's going to go through the middle for a second. We're just going to be working on this longer piece of wire. So we're going to be making 2 spirals from this wire. Now the length of it is 20 centimeters, so that's approximately 8 inches. So, and if you're obviously making a pair of earrings, you would do 2 of these, but we're just going to do 1 for now. So I've got 20 centimeters. So this is the correct size for a 10mm bead. So we're going to start off by making 2 spirals. Well, 1 spiral, then the other. So we're going to make 1 at one end and 1 at the other, and they're basically going to come together in a kind of S shape. You'll get what I mean when I move on. So if you're not very confident at making your spirals, I also have an essential techniques video tutorial that is just about spirals, so that's a great one to watch as well. But we're just going to go in and quickly make a spiral. So I'm going to go in quite close to the tip because I want it quite small, because I only need the wire to go through at this very end. I'm going to start turning. So I've just turned my pliers and I've just kind of got this hook just for the moment. And then I always, just to make sure I get a really nice round, I trim off the very, very tip of that, because that little bit that we grabbed right at the beginning is quite straight. So snip that tiny, tiny piece off. Now I'm starting on a curve. Can you see that's already curved? So I'm going to go in, back in with my pliers, same point that I had them on before, and start turning. And then once my wire joins up with the rest of the wire, I'm going to turn over the top. So it's going to run around next to it. Can we see that there? Like so. So once we get to this point, we can't really continue with the round nose pliers, so we need to move over to our chain nose pliers. So what we're going to do is we're going to hold across that spiral that we've just started making, and just keep pushing the wire around. So it's just that kind of opening it up that tiny bit. I do go into a lot more detail on my other video if you want to check that one out, but we're just going to wind, and what you'll end up with is it getting bigger and bigger. And what we want to do is we want to do this until we get to the halfway point of this piece of wire. So we're just going to work all the way down. Don't worry if you're not quite sure whereabouts the halfway point is. You can have a ruler handy if you want to, or once you've made both spirals, when you've got a little gap at the beginning, you can just assess them and see which size feels right and you want them to be even. So this time we can see if I hold this way around, my spiral is on this side of the wire. So this one, I want to come on the opposite side of the wire. So we've got to have a spiral here and a spiral on this side of the wire. Don't worry if it's slightly off, we can twist it a little bit. It's not a big problem. So we're just going to pop our pliers in again, make that little turn, snip off that very end, just so that we're starting on a nice curve. And we can just start winding this just the same as we did the opposite one. So go as far as you can with your round nose pliers, and then you're just going to swap over and use your chain nose pliers and just wind this down towards the opposite spiral. So just grabbing, turning, and you're just releasing them pliers that little bit each time, just so you can turn and get everything where you want it to be. So what we don't want to do is them to come over the top of each other, so we want them to sit next to each other like you can see there. So we're just going to take a look, and you can see this one's very slightly bigger, so we're just going to go back to the opposite one, and we're just going to work on these until we've got two nice even spirals as close as they can possibly be together. So all the way until they're right next to each other, like so. So this is what I meant by our S shape. So we've got one spiral going one direction, one spiral going the opposite direction. Now this is when we're going to need our bead and basically everything else. So we're just gonna pop them aside just 1 second, and we're going to make a wrap loop on this, because this is going to be one side of our connection. You could also do this with a head pin, so you could just have a loop on the top and your head pin, the end of your head pin at the other end. That's not a problem. I'm just showing you in a connection, so it could be used like this in the earrings, or it can be used in a rosary, it could be used in a bracelet. It's entirely up to you. So we're just going to make a quick wrap loop. We know our bead's going to sit in the middle here, so I'm just going to turn this around about here. I'm going to create that right angle, pop my pliers in, so bring that tail all the way around. Like I said, there is a more in-depth detailed video on wrap loops if you want to learn that essential technique. So I've got my loop there, so I just brought that wire all the way around, and then I'm just going to wind nice and just slowly and gently this way. And you can see how close my fingers are to the work. It's not a matter of just kind of wrapping it like so, you're guiding that wire through. So nice, 3 nice wraps. Trim off, flush side to the piece. So the flush side of your flush cutters is the flat side, not the side with the indentation. And then just to finish that wrap loop off, we're just going to make sure that end is just nicely squished. That is a technical term, squished. Okay, so this piece is now prepared. We've got our bead with our drill hole through, and we've got our little S-shaped spiral. So initially what we're going to do is we're going to kind of fold it in half. You see what I've done there? Just folded it in half. Okay, and then we're just going to open it up a little bit. What you can do is you can push them just a little bit. They will kind of spring back, but you just want that kind of little indentation. You could actually use the end of your pliers for that as well, but we just want to make, and you see how that's going to work now. So the other thing we need to do is kind of keep an eye on where the hole on our bead is. So we're going to come through the spiral here. We're going to come through the bead, and then we need to get to the spiral at the other side. So we are just going to manipulate this just so, whoops. It's not the easiest thing to do on camera. It's one of those things you do right up to your face so you can see where everything's going. We're just going to kind of clamp that around, and hopefully, so did you see how I'll just pull that back so the bead's in there. I know it's in the bead at the bottom, and just kind of clamp that around, and then hopefully you should just come through that opposite side. So we can see we've got our cage on there, but it's not really looking too clever at the moment, is it? So what we're going to do is we're going to push it nice and tight towards the wrap loop that we just did. And we're just going to find that middle bit. We want that little middle section to kind of come around the middle basically. And then we're just going to work on just pushing. It does take a little bit of time. I'm probably going to end up rushing this, but just take a little bit of time just pushing those layers. Whoops, right, just fell out. Let's get that to go back in like so. I'm just going to work on this side a little bit. So remember to hold the bottom of hold your loop. So we're just going to make sure we're happy with it just before we make the opposite wrapped loop. We can still adjust it afterwards, but I'm just making sure really happy with it like so. I'm quite happy with that now. So now we can pop our wrap loop on the opposite side. We want this to be really nice and tight because this little cage is quite springy, so we want to make sure we're nice and tight up to it. We're going to use the very tip of our pliers because we just want that little gap where these wraps on the opposite side are going to go. We're going to push away. We want to make sure we're pushing away in the same direction as the opposite side, because we want when we push away, we want our loop facing upwards. Okay, and then we know our loop on this side is going to be the same size, the same direction. So we're just going to bring that all the way around, reposition our pliers, taking this across, take out our pliers, hold that loop, and then we can wrap. Don't worry that this is moving around because this is going to tighten up when we've got these wraps in. 1, 2 and 3 wraps. 2 and 3, and that's all nicely tightened up now. We can trim off our wire again, flush side. Make sure when you are trimming anything that's got a loop on that you don't cut the loop as well, because that is a little bit soul destroying when you do that. It does happen, happens to me, happens to everybody, but just try and just be careful. So, and then you can just spend a little bit more time if you like. I'm really quite happy with that one, but if you want to just make sure you're happy with how your little cage is around, it should be more dense around the top and the bottom. Don't worry about that, and kind of open up towards the middle. So now I've got a little pair of little wrapped beads. They look like little candy, like little sweeties, don't they? So that is how you make your little caged beads. I hope you've really enjoyed that tutorial. It's one of my favorites. I really enjoy doing that. And watch out for more of the essential techniques and some more full tutorial videos coming very soon. I've got some really exciting things coming up soon actually, so do keep an eye out. Do make sure you've liked and subscribed to my channel, and make sure you click that bell and select all, and then you don't miss any of my new videos. So I will see you again soon. Take care.